All right. So this is the 3DM webinar where we're going to be talking about introverts on mission. And my name is Gina Mueller, and currently I'm the chair of the board for 3DM. I also lead the hub that is leading the movement in the upper Midwest and in the Northeast parts of the US. What that means is I spend a lot of my time with church leaders, nonprofit leaders, teams, as they're trying to learn how to create a missional discipleship culture in their context and in the things that they're leading. And I've gotten to coach hundreds of leaders over the years, and in many ways have been gathering intel for this topic for a lot of years. And so as I've been coaching and discipling lots of leaders around the country, I've been seeing the places where things have gotten stuck. And in some ways, that's some of the things that we'll be talking about today as we look at what it means to be an introvert on mission. My family and I, Jeff and I and our two kids, we live in Minnesota. And we've been living the family on mission lifestyle for probably 11-ish years. And so what that means practically is that fundamentally we believe that we are sent, that God's inviting us to participate with him in the things that he's doing right around us. It means that as a family, we're actively looking for people of peace, people who are open to us and who may be open to Jesus in the ordinary spaces of our lives. Places like our neighborhood, our workplace. For our kids are missionaries too. And so that means that they're looking for people of peace in their school, on their bus, on their sports teams, that we as a family believe that those natural spaces where we live and work and play, that those are the places where we are sent as missionaries. It also means that family on mission to us means that we build out extended family that's living on mission with us. And it also means that we use our home as a gathering space. And so supernatural things we see happen around food and around the table. And so people coming through our home on a regular basis just is the way that we live. And also, all four of us are introverts. And so the question that I get most often when we do live trainings, I get so many questions around boundaries and rhythms. And so when we tell stories and we talk about the way that we live, sometimes it can sound intimidating or even exhausting to some, right? As those of us that are wired like introverts, when we talk about the way that we have people in our home and sometimes what sounds like the pace of life, we'll talk about that in a moment. But when we tell those stories and we talk about the way that we live, I get questions, lots of questions around boundaries and rhythms because it can sound exhausting. And so I want to talk about that today. But also, in our movement, we talk a lot about missional discipleship. And what that means to us is that when we look at the way that Jesus made disciples, we see that as he's making disciples, what he made is missional disciples, right? He created missional disciples who lived on mission, and those things weren't separated. So to be a disciple means that you are a missionary, disciples who make disciples who make disciples. And my observation as I kind of observe the discipleship movement, if you will, my observation is that mission tends to be the place where things get stuck. So leaning into a discipling relationship, being invested in, developing the character stuff, that's all really good. But when we get to the competencies piece and growing skills for living as a follower of Jesus in our ordinary spaces, taking those risky steps of faith, finding people of peace who don't know Jesus yet, moving into their life, engaging in spiritual conversation, living like a missionary with others in community, what I see is that tends to be the place where there's a clog in the pipe where things tend to get stuck. And so that's what I want to speak into today with you. For our family, living as missionaries is just part of our identity. It's who we are. And that's what I believe that God's calling all of us into, that every single one of us has that same invitation. But in a house full of introverts, 100% of the people that live in my home are introverts. And so what does that mean for us? How do we do that in a way that's sustainable, that doesn't wear us out, and frankly still feels like us, where we're not trying to be extroverts? Yeah. Which honestly, the introverts that are on this call, you have been asked to live in an extroverted world most of the time. And so how do we engage on mission? How do we live a lifestyle as a missionary living on mission in a way that still feels like us? So again, the flow of today, what I want to do is spend some time kind of up front in the beginning of our time together, doing a bit of teaching, sharing some content. I'll share a little bit of my story. Obviously, we're going to aim for an hour together. And so I certainly cannot cover everything that there is to cover in an hour. We're really just going to crack it's going to be the tip of the iceberg. But what I want to make sure that we get to is I want to share some practical tips, some practical pieces, so that you're all walking away with some things that you can begin to implement right away. And then again, I want to leave some space for questions at the end. So those of you that are coming in, what I would love for you to do is write down your questions as you think of them. I'd love my aim is to leave some time for Q&A at the end. And again, for me as an introvert, you asking me questions helps draw some things out of me. So keep track of your questions. I'm aware on this call, we have both introverts and extroverts. So we've got, obviously there's a lot of introverts on this call that want to live missionally, right? That want to crack the code, that want to get better at it in some way. But I also know that there's some extroverts on this call that would love to figure out a way to help the introverts in their lives take some missional steps. And so my hope is that these next few moments together are going to be helpful for you all. What I would love to start with, and I intentionally primed the pump with an email this morning, so you had a minute to think about it ahead of time. But what I'd love for you to do, where I want to start is, would you take a minute, and this is directed specifically to the introverts on the call, take a minute and type in the chat, what is the thing that feels hard for you when you think about living missionally? When you think about living a missionary lifestyle, what feels hard to you? Is there something about that feels personally scary, or that you carry a handicap, you know, that you're like walking with a limp, that there's something that you inherently aren't good at, or that you don't carry the skill just because of your personality or the way that you're wired? Type it in the chat. And it's important to name those things, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But I want to start with, my guess is you're going to have a lot of friends in the room that share a similar thing that feels hard. So start typing in the chat what feels difficult about mission. So we've got exhaustion, loss of personal time, bad at starting conversations. Yep. Social energy. Yep. Hospitality people. Yep. How do I plan the first meal for somebody if I don't know what they like? This is great. Remembering names, making small talk. Great. Having lots of people around all the time. Yep. Moving conversations to spiritual conversations. Yep. Good. Being around lots of people. Yep. It can be exhausting. There's lots of head nods. Lots of people identifying with what you guys are typing. Yeah, the preference is just to spend time by ourselves. Yep. Good. Small talk, when you know that there's more important things that you actually want to talk about. Small talk is really hard. Good. It's great. Keep going. You know what this does is it actually helps. Not only does it give us things to identify together that we all can actually, a lot of us are like, oh yeah, that, me too. Yep, oh, yep, that makes sense. But it actually helps us as we're gathering more intel to figure out how to help more introverts engage in mission. So this is actually, it's selfish. It's gathering intel for me too. It's great. I love it. Do I really like people? I actually just don't know if I actually like people. I love it. It's great. Good. So I promised you personal stories. And so I'll start with confessions from this missional introvert. So probably 9 or 10 years ago, our family, you can keep typing in the chat. We'll all just keep nodding in agreement. 9 or 10 years ago, I can't remember which, our family was really desiring to live as a family on mission, but honestly, we didn't have a clue what we were doing. And we felt like, God, would you put us in a place where we could experiment and try things? Because for me, I wanted to teach other people how to do that, but I can't teach other people how to do something that I've never done before. And so I knew I needed to go first. And so we were in a bit of transition as a family looking for a new house. And so I was like, God, this is a great opportunity. Will you put us in a neighborhood where we can just like try things, where our new neighbors can basically be our guinea pigs, where we can like try stuff and fail and figure this out and try to attempt this whole family on mission thing. And so long story short, we landed in a new house, but our new house was a short sale and there was a lot of work that had to be done before our house was like livable. And so we had about 6 to 8 weeks where we were doing a lot of like demolition to our house and a lot of work on the inside of our house. And my kids were really little at the time. They were 2 and 4. And so we would come and meet Dad and bring him dinner so that we could like have, crazy season of working on this house that we didn't live in yet, right? After work hours and things. So we would bring Jeff dinner. And I remember this one specific night. Of course, the neighbors like saw all the hustle and bustle in and out of the house, right? And so they knew that new neighbors had moved in, but really haven't seen us yet because we didn't actually live there yet. And so we had brought Jeff Subway, but inside was like disaster zone, construction. And so with our kids being so little, we were having family dinner in the garage, sitting on top of upside down 5-gallon buckets, eating our Subway. And it was kind of still chilly outside. And so the garage door was closed. And so we're sitting there eating our Subways while my kids are, small. And all of a sudden I hear this knock on the garage door. Not like garage door, like garage door. I hear this knock on the garage door. And I look over at my husband and I'm like, what do we do? And he's like, open the door. And I was like, oh, okay. This is like confessions from an introvert. We had moved into our neighborhood wanting to be missional and live on mission, but I didn't actually want to talk to anybody. And so here, these people had come, super nice neighbors who had brought us gifts. Hello, people of peace. They were serving us. And yet, for me, it was like this thing of getting over talking to these strangers, right? So more confessions. Some of you listed it in the chat. I'm not good at small talk. I don't naturally think of the questions to ask other people when we're in conversations with strangers. I have such a hard time thinking of the questions to ask to get them talking about themselves, right? It's after the conversation when I've already left that I'm like, oh, shoot, I should have asked them that, right? Walking into a room full of lots of people that I don't know is terrifying and exhausting. It's terrifying. For me, it's less about the number of people in the room and it's more about how well I know them. So extroverts, this is the stuff that you write down because you got to know how your introverts are thinking, right? It's less about the number of people in the room. It's more about how well I know them. And if there's lots of people that I don't know and a couple people that I do, you better believe I'm going to beeline for the people that I do know first, right? That's my natural tendency. The amount of times that you'll find me willingly striking up a conversation with the person that I'm sitting next to on an airplane is exactly never, unless the Holy Spirit hits me upside the head with a 2x4. Yes? I prefer confessions. I prefer being with a few people that I know well, rather than a lot of people that I don't. So what that means is translation into mission. What that means is the temptation for me to stick with my people, so to speak, is great. Yeah, which is the opposite of sentness. It's the opposite of me living fully into my sentness. So that is the temptation for me. Our family has a low tolerance for busy. So having lots of things on the calendar, being out every night of the week, low tolerance for that. We avoid large crowds like the plague. And the caveat to that, I would say, the caveat to that is unless there is strategic, like some strategic missional value to it. then yes, absolutely we'll engage. But an example of that is I live in Minnesota. Yesterday was the start to the Minnesota State Fair, which is a thing in Minnesota. It's like a cultural thing. It is one of the largest, best state fairs in the country. You will not find us there unless there is some year that there's some strategic missional value. We will avoid that thing at all cost. I surveyed a couple other of my introverted missional friends. And when I say that, I mean, these are people that are really living on mission and are introverts. So they're not people that are like standing on the sidelines, hanging back, but they're people who are really living a missionary lifestyle. And this is what they said is really hard about it. So this is just the beginning. This is just naming the things that feel difficult. One person said, just getting started with the inviting, just getting over ourselves and starting the inviting feels difficult. One person said there's a loss of a sense of privacy with opening up your home. When life feels busy, when there's a lot of things going on, you want to protect your downtime. And so it feels difficult to give up that space to be with other people or to invite other people in. Those of you who are familiar with our language around people of peace, finding passing people of peace, you know, the people that kind of come through your life for a quick moment in the day or something. Finding passing people of peace feels difficult because it takes a lot of emotional energy to kind of get outside of yourself when you're kind of out in the world. Engaging with strangers is hard. There isn't a general desire to have lots of relationships. And so the work, it just takes a lot of effort, a lot of work to push deeper and further with casual acquaintance type people of peace. One person said, I hear God better when I have lots of quiet time alone. And so hearing God on mission in the moment is hard. And finally, many of us will identify with this. My home is the hideout, the safe zone, the boundaried area, the place for recovery from ministry or from work, from the spaces where you're with lots of people. Coming home is sort of the recovery space. And so what feels hard, opening up my home on a regular basis, was difficult early on. It's really helpful to name it. For all of these reasons that we've just named for the last 5-10 minutes, the enemy has been telling you that you are disqualified, that there's something wrong with you, that because of how you're wired, that you aren't cut out for this missional thing. And doesn't that just sound like what the enemy would do to sideline us, right? Doesn't that just sound like a great strategy? In fact, if you read in Luke 4 of the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness, what does the enemy do? He goes after the core pieces of Jesus's identity. It's been the enemy's strategy since the beginning of time, to attack the core pieces of identity. You are designed as an introvert. That's not a flaw. That's God's fingerprints on you, yeah? And so doesn't it sound just like the enemy to attack a core piece of identity and to tell you that that disqualifies you and takes you out of the game, right? Here's what's wrong with that. Studies show that 30 to 50% of the human race are introverts. 30 to 50%. Now, it's difficult to get a concrete number because introverts have had to function in an extroverted world for a long time. So we've had to change in some ways to function more like extroverts. So it's difficult to get a concrete number on that. But the thing is, God would not have created 30 to 50% of humanity with an inherent handicap for your core purpose and calling. That's not a thing. God would not have done that, yeah? When I think about Jesus inviting the 12 disciples, he said, come follow me, right? Invitation into relationship. Come with me, come be with me. Come be a part of the family. Access to my life, full access into relationship. So come follow me. But there was a second part to that invitation, which was, and I'm gonna teach you how to fish for people. Come with me, come be with me. And part of being with me, part of being in a discipling relationship with me is I'm gonna teach you how to fish for people. I'm gonna teach you how to live a life on mission. I'm gonna teach you how to engage in finding people who aren't yet disciples and bring them, disciple them into the kingdom. Now, we have no way of knowing who in scripture were introverts. I wish that that were true. I wish we could, but we don't. But I have to believe that of the 12 disciples that Jesus invited to follow him, at least some of them were. I mean, statistically, 4 to 6 of them would have been introverts, right? But the invitation was still the same. Come be with me, and I'm going to teach you. I'm going to help you grow skills that you don't have yet. You don't know how to do this yet, but I'm going to show you how. I'm going to teach you how. And so the second half of Jesus's invitation was the same to everybody, that he's going to teach them how to live a life on mission with him, to make disciples, to go and find people that weren't yet following Jesus and disciple them into the kingdom. And what I want you to walk away with today, what I want you to hear, is that not only are you needed in the game, right? Not only are you needed in the missional movement, but you are a gift. The way that you are designed, the way that you are made is actually a gift to mission, to the missional movement, to people who aren't yet following Jesus. The way that you are wired is a gift. And I want you to hear that, not only that, again, that you're needed as a player, but you actually carry things that are needed, and there would be a void without you. You're meant to play a specific part. The part that you play is crucial, and we're going to unpack why in a moment. I would love for you to be able to name, when we came in today, you named the thing that felt hard. What I would love for you to be able to do when we're done is name your superpower. What's the superpower that you have as introverts towards mission? So really quickly, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because I want to get to the practical kind of tips and strategies, but very quickly, introvert versus extrovert. Introverts live life in their heads. So introverts are, it's really about the internal world. And so they're in their thoughts all the time. So that's why I gave you the question that I was going to ask you to respond to ahead of time, because introverts are generally internal processors. And so when asked a question, sometimes it takes us a minute to figure out what we think, and we oftentimes won't share until we've thought it through. Introverts get their energy from being alone. We recharge when we're spent, when we have low energy. The way that we recharge is by being alone. Yeah? Extroverts live in the external world. So it is all about what is out there. Life is lived out there, but they're external processors. And so extroverts find out what they think by talking it through. And so they'll talk through it all and then discover what they think by the end of talking it out, right? But extroverts get their energy by being with people. So they feel more energized after being out in the world with lots of people. What I want to do is kind of break down, what does that mean then for mission? Because my observation is that we have come to think that mission is an extroverted activity. That if you are extroverted, and if you think fivefold, if you're an evangelist, if you're an extroverted evangelist, you are the ones created for mission, and the rest of us just need to like sit back and watch you do your job. So I want to not only dispel that lie, but I want to unpack some things and give you some tips and strategies of the things that I've learned over the last decade or so for ourselves, for me and my family personally, but also the people that I've been coaching too. So I want to look at the strategy that Jesus gave the disciples in Luke 9 and 10, which is to go find people of peace. We're going to unpack this in a moment, but quickly, when we're talking about people of peace, we're looking for people who like you and welcome you and serve you. And if they're open to you in those ways, then maybe they're going to be open to the message that you carry. Now, extroverts will tend to have lots of people of peace, like cast a wide net. Why? Because they're really great at connecting with people in the external world. So naturally, extroverts are going to collect lots of people of peace. They're great at connecting, great at conversation. Typically, I mean, we're overgeneralizing, right, for the sake of conversation. But typically, extroverts are going to be great at connecting with people, great at going, great at talking naturally with people. So they tend to collect lots of people of peace from lots of places. Introverts tend to have fewer people of peace. And then they go deeper into those relationships, because naturally introverts prefer fewer friends. They prefer being around fewer people. And so what an introvert is going to do is to prioritize key people of peace. And then they want deeper, more meaningful conversation rather than baseline small talk. Introverts in general are not great at small talk, but we actually have lots of deep things that we want to talk about, that we care about, that mean a lot to us. And so we prefer deeper conversations. So again, the strategy for a lot of introverts most naturally is going to be to find a few people apiece and to go deeper with them. So prioritize them, bring them in close, invite them in. But what I want you to know is that the qualification that you have for mission is not to gather a crowd or work a room. That's not what makes you qualified for mission. It's to find people apiece. And then once you find them, you stay with them. Now, we talked about how a lot of introverts have had to function in an extroverted world. Couple things that I notice: classrooms over the last many years, right? They used to be individual desks put in rows. And so kids in the classroom had lots of time to do individual work. Now the strategy for many classrooms is to clump them into, put the desks into clumps. And so students are required to do lots of group work, right? And so extroverted activity. I notice in the workspaces that there's a lot of individual offices and cubicles that are going away. And the trend is now to create shared office space, right? Now, all of those things are great for teamwork, for brainstorming, for learning how to work together, which all of us need to do and benefit from. However, introverts will do their best work alone. And so innovation and creativity actually comes in quiet for introverts. And so many spaces in kind of our natural world are built for extroverts. And so it's natural that when we start talking about having a missional lifestyle and living like missionaries, introverts are like tapping out. Like, I have nothing left. I'm going to tap out of that conversation because I am exhausted from the rest of life. So you can see why then coming home, naturally, we desire that our home spaces are the retreat place. It's the recovery center from having to be extroverted all over the place, right? Now, the other thing that we should recognize is that the missional life, living a missional life, will cost us all. It will feel costly to every single one of us. It is costly. Nowhere in Scripture, if we're honest, if we start digging through the Gospels again, nowhere in Scripture do I see that Jesus's invitation to come follow him means that it's going to feel easy to us. Yeah, that's not the deal. Instead, we hear Jesus saying things like, come and die. And if you want to find your life, then you lose it. You find your life by giving it up. Yeah. And so this life will cost us. It will feel costly to all of us, but it's helpful to recognize that it's going to feel costly for different reasons. And different parts of the missional lifestyle are going to feel costly for different people, but it will feel hard. You will reach the end of yourself. But the parts that feel hard are going to feel hard for different reasons. So often, if I again just make overgeneralizations, the part that feels hard for us as introverts, going to find new people apiece, that doesn't mean that we don't do it, right? It doesn't mean that we don't lean into it and learn how to do it, but it does mean that it's going to feel hard. And it's going to be a different part than what feels hard for our extrovert friends. That doesn't give us a pass on doing the things that feel hard. That's discipleship. That's the process of being developed as a disciple, which is going to happen every single day until the day that we die. But there's strategies and tips that I want to share. It's important that you are able to live a naturally missional life as an introvert. There's always going to be ways to grow skills and to stretch yourself. And so that's still true, but not trying to do it like the extroverts. That's their job. That's their superpower. So you have your own superpowers for mission. And so to do that, I want to unpack the people apiece strategy and look at some other tools with you. So let me share my screen and we're going to look at some scripture together and then we'll talk about some tools. You guys can see that? Let's look at Luke 10 together. You'll find the same strategy in Luke 9 when Jesus sends out the 12. We're going to look at Luke 10. It's unpacked a little bit more. We get a little bit more detail in Luke 10 when he sends out the 72. So let's look at this together. It says, the Lord now chose 72 other disciples and sent them ahead in pairs to all the towns and places that he planned to visit. These were his instructions to them. The harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest and ask him to send more workers into his fields. Now go and remember that I'm sending you out as lambs among wolves. Don't take any money with you, nor a traveler's bag, nor an extra pair of sandals. Don't stop to greet anyone on the road. Whenever you enter someone's home, first say, may God's peace be on this house. If those who live there are peaceful, the blessing will stand. If they're not, the blessing will return to you. Don't move around from home to home. Stay in one place, eating and drinking what they provide. Don't hesitate to accept hospitality, because those who work deserve their pay. If you enter a town and it welcomes you, eat whatever is set before you, heal the sick, and tell them the kingdom of God is near you now. But if a town refuses to welcome you, go into its streets and say, we wipe even the dust of your town from our feet to show you that we've abandoned you to your fate. And know this, the kingdom of God is near you now. So this is the strategy that Jesus unpacks for his disciples, both the 12 and then the 72, for how they should do mission. So Jesus is saying, this is how we're going to do mission together. And there's a few things that I want to unpack that's helpful for us as introverts. So let me get over to the whiteboard and we'll unpack this together. So we're looking at, we're looking at Luke 10, which is finding people of peace. And the first strategy that Jesus gives is to go. So we should know that, when you're looking for people of peace, they're not just going to magically appear before you. They're not going to hunt you down. The first thing is that you need to go. But how he tells us to go is to go in pairs. And that feels strategic for us as introverts for a number of reasons. But a couple things that I would add to that. Jesus sends them to not go into mission alone. That feels significant, that we're not actually meant to do this alone. So he sends them to go ahead and he sends them in pairs. Strategically, I would say bring an extrovert. Every introvert, every missional introvert that I have asked has said the same thing. For the first part, when we're looking for people of peace, bring an extrovert. This is arguably the hardest part for introverts when we're looking at engaging in a missional lifestyle. When you're going to find new people of peace, when you're having to talk to strangers, arguably that's the hardest part for introverts. So it makes sense why the enemy has sidelined us. It's step one. He takes us out at step one. And so it's imperative that we recognize that we are not meant to carry all the skills in and of ourselves to live a missional life. That's not the way this thing was designed. That's the beauty of the body. That's why Jesus created the body of Christ, that we are meant to go together. We're better together. We go further together. And so the first thing is you're not meant to go alone. So who can you bring with you? Mission is a team sport. We're meant to go with other people in community. And if you look at how Jesus did mission, he didn't do it himself. He built an extended family that went on mission with him. And so for us as introverts, how do we leverage other people? At the very least, bring someone who is better than you at striking up conversation with strangers. Strategy. Bring someone that's better than you at conversation, at building the first parts of relationship, and then you can follow after them with the skills that you carry, right? Introverts are usually better listeners. And so you can be a really good listener and pull that person in if they really are a person of peace. Even better, so bring someone that's better at conversation than you. Potentially bring an extrovert with you. But even better, build a family. Because the best way that we've seen over 10, 11 years of doing this, the best way that we've seen mission happen, because mission isn't an event. It's not an activity that we do every once in a while. It's your life. It's a lifestyle. And the best way to do mission as a lifestyle is within the context of family, where then you're inviting people into family where naturally you don't have to do it all. You don't have to carry every conversation. You've got lots of other gifts in the room that can love on your people of peace. So the first thing that we see is Jesus tells us to go in pairs. The next thing that we see Jesus say is go needy. And I would say that feels really uncomfortable for a lot of us because there's some weird thing. I don't know who told us this, but somewhere along the way, somebody told us that as Christians, we need to wear our like superhero cape. And so when you're moving onto the block, you are the superhero Christian moving on to save the world, right? And so you like, dun, da, 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 we have arrived. And so the whole thing of going needy, Jesus says, don't bring an extra pair of sandals, don't bring this, don't bring that. Look, Jesus was sending them into many towns ahead. They were going to walk there. They didn't have cars. They were going to walk ahead to many towns ahead, and they didn't bring a bag. They didn't bring food. They didn't pack a cooler, right? Why did Jesus say that? Well, when we talk about people of peace, there's a couple things. Jesus is giving them a chance to have other people serve them, because other people serving you is one of the key things that we recognize. Oh, that person probably likes me. They're welcoming me in and they're serving me. Wow, they might be a person of peace to me. So that's helpful. For us as introverts, it gives us a reason to have a conversation. If you go needy, if you don't have everything that you need, if there's something that you can ask somebody else to borrow or to help you with something, this is an amazing strategy for us as introverts because it gives you a reason to have a conversation, to ask someone for help, to start something. In the early days of us living in this neighborhood, we intentionally did not buy a leaf blower for like 3 years. And we have like mammoth maple trees, tons of them, which spit stuff like multiple times a year. And so we had to go ask our neighbor to borrow their leaf blower. It sounds silly, but it was a way for us to put our neighbor in the position of power, which is really helpful, but to actually build relationship with them because we needed to ask to borrow something. Could we afford a leaf blower? Yeah, we could have, but we intentionally chose to not buy one. We've had, ask someone to teach you how to do something that they're real passionate about. Lots of families have like the traditional, authentic family dish that they make. Ask them to teach you how to make it. To teach you how to do the hobby, whatever kind of like hobby that they're really passionate about. If you've found a person of peace or someone who might be, ask them to teach you how to do something. And as you're building relationship, you reveal your vulnerabilities and the things that you need. And it helps other people lean into relationship with you rather than you always being the provider and the ones that has everything. So phase one, when we're looking for people of peace, phase one is go find, shorthand, people of peace. And of course, these are people that like you, welcome you, and serve you. Phase two is to stay with them. And let's talk about what that looks like or what that means. So I'm going to throw another tool up here. So give me a minute while I draw it. We found it helpful to use something that I will attempt to make look like a funnel. As when we're talking about how to do mission, how to build family on mission with people of peace, we found this to be a helpful kind of tool or analogy. I mean, it kind of looks like a funnel, yeah? That'll do. Get the small part down here. Okay. So the first thing that you need to do, this funnel represents getting people into the funnel, so to speak, is when you're looking for lots of people of peace. And then as they move through the funnel going this way, there tends to be less and less people, right? Until you have a moment where you're actually formally inviting them to come and be with you more regularly or come into some more regular orbits with you. So this part up here is rather informal. And this part down here is kind of the more formal part of relationship, even discipling them into the kingdom. And some strategies as you go down the funnel. First, you want to get people of peace into the funnel, but as you go down the funnel, you're going to increase invitation. I can't type or write and talk at the same time. You're going to increase invitation to you. Come and be with me. But you're also going to increase challenge to live like Jesus more and more as they come down the funnel. And I'll explain that. The other thing that you're going to do is increase your own vulnerability. And so what you want to do first, into the funnel, right? So we call this part up here, the wide end of the funnel. And the way that you are doing that is the people peace strategy. So the way that you are getting people into your funnel is you're going to find people of peace. And once you find them, then you stay with them. And that's this part down here. Now, how do you find people of peace? Typically in 3DM, typically we'll offer a couple strategies. One, you go to things that are already planned by someone else. If you're going to look for people of peace, you have to be around lots of people so that you can figure out who likes you, welcomes you, and wants to serve you. And so a couple strategies, go to the things that are already planned by someone else. So if somebody is throwing a party, show up. If your city hosts things, 4th of July or fireworks or the kind of town gatherings, show up. Those are things that other people plan for you. Or you create opportunities where people come to you, right? These are extroverted activities. Yeah, I think we can all agree that this is the part that exhausts us, because naturally we're going to be in spaces where there's lots of people. And so this is a missional decision for an introvert to engage in the things that feel outside of our comfort zone, in the things that don't feel comfortable or, quite frankly, aren't our preference, because we prefer to be around a few people. It's these things where you're around lots of people you're going and looking for people of peace, the wide end of the funnel stuff. It's going to require a lot of us emotionally and mentally. The biggest inhibitor for an introvert to make the choice to lean into the hard parts of this part of being with lots of people is overcommitment and busyness in the rest of your life. Busy is the barrier to mission for the introvert. So the high challenge question for us is how much are we willing to reorient our life around the ways of Jesus? What do you need? What do you need to say no to so that the rest of your life isn't so exhausting that you have nothing left to engage the primary purpose that God's calling you into? So we talk about rhythms. What are the rhythms that actually will set you up for you feeling rested so that when you go into this kind of season, that you're able to engage at that level? So some random examples, and I'm going to share lots of examples for us in the stage of life that we're in. We've got kids at home, so some of my examples are that, but this is true any stage of life that you're in, finding the rhythms that work for you. When our kids were really little, and we were starting to do a lot of this family on mission stuff, looking for people of peace, one of the things that we started recognizing is, again, all 4 of us are introverts. So our kids needed time with just us. And so we started Friday night family night, where we would make homemade pizzas and watch movies and that kind of stuff. So that's not the missional space. We don't invite other people into that. That's just our time where our kids feel invested in. Another choice that we make, and you don't have to make the same choices that our family made, but as we're looking at how to create space so that we're not exhausted for mission, we took a look at our kids' activities and our kids' sports. And if the question is, what do we have to say no to make space for mission? We made some choices. We love team sports. We love putting our kids in sports, but we're not going to put them in everything. So we're going to strategically look at our calendar and have them pick and choose. So we, observation, America idolizes the family. So a lot of American families will put their kids above everything else and put their kids in everything. And so we made a different choice. We don't overcommit. We don't say yes to the kinds of sports that will zap us, that's going to drain all of our time and money and resources. So that's one of the choices that we made. We prioritize family dinners at home as many times a week as possible, because with us going in lots of directions, that kind of recenters us as a family. It brings us back together and reconnects us as a family. Other things, other kind of strategies with the wide end of the funnel stuff. This is where you bring an extrovert. The other thing that I noticed is that when I have an extrovert with me, I'm not good at small talk. I'm not good at some of those initial conversations, but it helps me learn closely from them. When my daughter was a baby, when she was kind of toddler age, she would stand at my feet and look up at my face and watch my mouth move as she was trying to learn a language. And I just noticed her all the time, just looking up at, just staring at me and watching my mouth move. It seems similar to that in the ways that I need to learn from extroverts and how they, like, what questions do they ask? Because I don't think of that stuff. That's not how I'm wired, but it helps kind of stretch those skills for me. Example, when we were looking for people of peace in our neighborhood, I told you about the garage story. So those were our first people of peace, but we felt like we were hitting a wall on our ability to meet more people of peace. So we knew we had to gather people. So we wanted to throw a block party, but something that was lightweight, low maintenance, and was sustainable. But I knew no one would, we were the new kids on the block. So no one's going to show up just because we put flyers in their mailboxes. And so I knew I was going to have to take these things door to door and actually like ring doorbells and have conversations with people. And that made me want to throw up. And so what I did was I found my resident extrovert to go with me, because that was the way to do it. And we ended up with 65 people on our front lawn the first time that we did it. Other kind of tips and tricks: plan specific times before and after large group activities. When you have people in your home, you have to have time to recharge on the front end and on the back end, and hold that time as yours. Other thoughts: deliberately schedule in your time. What do you need? If this is the value, if mission is going to be one of the big rocks in your jar, what do you need to make that happen? Do you need time alone to get coffee? Do you need to go for a run? Do you need to sneak off by yourself at the end of the day to your room to have, time by yourself? What do you need to create space that charges your battery? One of my introverted missional friends said, the missional things that drain your energy, they will feel worth it. Even if it makes you tired, it's gonna be worth the extra effort. But you've got to plan time around to recharge. Another thought, this is great. Another thought that another introvert shared was to linger, to learn how to linger. Isn't that brilliant? So the extroverted part of wide end of the funnel is being around lots of people, but that's not the only way to find people of peace. Introverts are actually going to function better when we can find people of peace in small number. And one of the strategies for that is to linger. So you may not be able to impersonate an extrovert, but you can linger. So don't rush from your garage into your house. Don't race outside to do yard work with earphones in your ears and then head back inside as soon as possible. Learn to linger. When you get home from work, linger around the garage or in the yard. It helps, it helps us connect with people outside. We chose to put, those cheap Adirondack chairs that you can get at Home Depot for like 14 bucks. We put a couple of those in the front of our house because we don't have a front porch. Minnesota doesn't do front porches. We do back decks and patios. And so we chose to put a couple chairs in the front of our house so that we could linger in the front of our house rather than just spending time in the back of our house. It helps us connect with people. Linger on your way to the mailbox. Linger as you're working in the flower beds by the street. Are there ways that you can linger, not even just at home, but as you're kind of out and about, that gives you space to connect with people? So phase 1 is find people of peace. And then phase 2, once you find them, then you stay with them. So you start inviting them closer, start inviting them into the things that you're already doing, into your wider extended family that's going on mission with you. Again, one of the, couple more things and then we'll open it up for questions. One of the things that I'm often asked about is boundaries. What are your family's boundaries? Because you're introverts, how do you do boundaries? And I would say it's honestly less about boundaries and more about sustainability. So within our movement, we often suggest doing predictable patterns, kind of setting up predictable patterns in your life and your schedule so that these sorts of things go on autopilot. And again, in our family, we can't do busy. We don't have capacity for every night of the week to be full. But what are the predictable patterns that make this possible for us? So some examples would be having Monday night dinner, or Thursday night open table, where that is the space where you invite in your non-Christian people of peace very intentionally. That is the space where you do that. Or those of us that are doing missional communities, you're going to have a missional community gathered time. That's kind of the organized time for doing that. One of the tips that we would offer for our introvert missionaries is to set times. So you can have an end time on that stuff. It doesn't have to be open-ended, where, you know, people have to linger in your house till 10:30 at night. You can say, we're going to gather from 6 to 8, right? And here's what that does. Here's what we found. It not only helps it be sustainable for us, where that can be a predictable pattern because we know people are going to go home at a certain time, but it actually makes it able for other people to engage and come back. We always say in our house, people don't stay guests, they become family. And if you become family, that means that you help clean up at the end of the night, but it also means that hopefully you're going to come back, that it's not just going to be special events that we do like once a year or once a month even, that you're going to be a regular part of the orbit of our life. And we want that to be sustainable for everyone and us. And what we found is that if you do, you know, a Monday night thing that goes until 10:30 at night, well, that's great one time, but people have lives and have to go to work the next day. And so that doesn't become sustainable for really anybody long-term. And so how do we create space for that? One of my missional introvert friends experimented with this by having eat and run dinners. So this is the way that he was learning how to invite people into his house regularly. He did eat and run dinners from 5:30 to 7:30, same night of the week, every week. No one stayed late. They kicked everyone out at 7:30, and they communicated it really clearly and in a fun way. And we found it actually helps to have somebody who's not living in your house. So somebody who's going on mission with you, who's not living at your house, invite people to head home and to come back next week. And he said what that did for him was it allowed him to fully invest for those 2 hours and not feel exhausted for the rest of the week. So those are just some tips and tricks. What you'll find is that as you start taking steps, it tends to grow your capacity. So the goal is never to turn you into an extrovert. That's not the goal. But you have to start where you are and start building sustainable rhythms that make mission possible for you. And what you find is that your capacity starts to grow over time, especially as you go in community, when it's not just going by yourself. So that's enough content for today. We'll stop there. What I would love to do is just take some time. I realize we're getting to the end of our hour, but we'll continue recording too. If you have to go, that's fine. But I'd love to take some time for questions. What are you thinking about? What do you want to know? What would be helpful? If you have a question, just put your mic on, take it off mute to ask a question.
Gina, the first thing I want to say, sorry, is can you give us the link to get the recording so we have that?
Yep, you bet. I'll send it out in an email after the webinar is done. What else? What are you thinking about? Anything that would be helpful to unpack a little bit more?
Can you speak a little bit more about how introverts and extroverts can work together to complement one another on mission and not work against each other? This has all been very helpful, but if you could talk about that a little more specifically.
Yep, one more time. I had an issue with my sound. How introverts and extroverts complement each other? Is that what you said? Yeah, okay. Yes, so what I have observed is in the early parts of mission, so when we're looking for people of peace, generally speaking, and again, I'm speaking in real overgeneralization, but generally speaking, the wide end of the funnel piece where we have to go and find new people a piece means talking to strangers and finding, you know, forming new relationships, talking to people. So those are the spaces where extroverts tend to be real helpful. So if you are married to an extrovert, if you have an extrovert in your family, this is not an extrovert, but babies and dogs are really good missional tools, like very good. Helps you connect with people. So get a baby or a dog, you know, borrow one, I don't know. But extroverts tend to be good at starting conversations. Introverts are better listeners. Extroverts tend to have lots of people apiece, introverts have few. And so we've just found it to be helpful when you have to do kind of go and find type of activities, that extroverts are good with that. Introverts are actually great at prioritizing people apiece and pulling them closer. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds because I've noticed nuances when we start overlaying things like fivefold and personality giftings and things like that. So we can't just shove people into introvert extrovert boxes, but generally speaking, extroverts are so helpful for us in the go and find stages. What I've found is that we tend to get more comfortable once we know somebody. So the second or third time that we've been with someone, we're a little bit more comfortable in those conversations and we can kind of get a little bit deeper in those. But for us, extroverts are helpful in the early days of go and find. And we tend to be better listeners and prioritize people apiece and pull them closer. Just a couple thoughts. That was a good question.
Sometimes might need times in response to that to educate I'm married to an uber extrovert, and so you might need to educate them. At some point they need to stop talking because now you have something to say.
Yes.
And you've got stuff that you want. So used to you not talking that they forget that maybe you have something to offer. So
yes.
you want a good communication with your extroverted partner that, you know, hey, leave some time for my thoughts, like at the end of your 20-minute soliloquy.
Yeah, or ask me, what do you think about that? Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Pam.
I tend to project my introvertedness on everyone else. So like I assume that, you know, I like to be left by myself, so I assume that other people like to be left by themselves as well.
Yes.
You know, and then it would be annoying to them, or like whatever if I go up and like chat with them, you know, when they're out and about doing their stuff. Like to what extent do we like respect other people's sort of privacy and that type of thing, and to what extent do we sort of push through? I don't know.
Yeah, that's common. I would say introverts tend to not assume that other people want to hear what they have to say. So we live in the internal world, and we don't automatically assume that somebody else, if we go up to talk to them, that they actually care or want to hear what we have to say. So if we are engaging with people of peace, it's helpful to just notice what do you notice about them? Do they appear to be introverted? Do they appear to be extroverted? Again, I typically start layering on fivefold and other things that I have learned over the years too, just to learn people. But when you're asking questions, if you notice that they're rather reserved, then you respect that, right? But what I've found is the more that I share my vulnerabilities, the more that it opens other people up to share theirs. So if you have somebody that's really closed off, actually it's a real gift for you to share your own vulnerabilities, and the things that are hard for you, the places where you're desperate for God to show up are perfect to share, which takes courage. Courage for us. It can be a learned skill for us who are more private people, but the more that we share our vulnerabilities, the more others share theirs too.
I'm wondering, as you've had others try to inspire you as an introvert into mission, what are ways that have felt like it honors you as an introvert rather than just trying to change you into being an extrovert?
Yeah, that's great. I think some of the tools around giving me permission to not have people stay forever because I get tired by the end. Or sometimes it's not that we kick people out all the time, only after 2 hours, right? Like sometimes it does linger because it's a special evening. But the thing that honors me is when I need to go take a break. So confessions from this introvert, sometimes I'll go take 5 minutes in my room when there's still lots of people in my house just to take a breath, and then I'll go back out, right? Bathroom breaks are wonderful. The other thing that I've noticed, something that honors me, but also the other introverts in my midst, in group settings, introverts tend to feel uncomfortable when they don't know lots of people. And one of the ways to help them feel comfortable is to give them a job. So deploying your introverts to serve food, to clean up trash, to bring around a drink tray, like it's the ways that you can deploy the introverts to give them a job actually helps them connect with people. So that's one of the ways to honor too. Good question.
You mentioned the fivefold ministry.
Yeah.
And you have a house full of introverts. Did you and your husband's fivefold complement each other? Were they similar? Or did you use the children mainly as the icebreakers, or did you bring in some extroverts to help as well?
We've always looked for ways to bring in extroverts into our wider family. So we function like a family on mission, nuclear family, but we also are always discipling other people. And so we're always building out a wider family that's coming on mission with us, right? And so naturally within that spectrum, there's going to be people who span, and introvert, extrovert isn't just 2 boxes, there's a spectrum there. So you're going to find more introverted introverts and more introverted extroverts, so to speak. So there's a spectrum there. But anytime you're inviting more people in, you're going to find the breadth of the gifts in the body. And anytime we can leverage those, both the introverted, extroverted stuff, but also fivefold gifts, all of those things, the more that we can release people to use their gifts, the better we are going together. So we're always looking for ways to do that. I'm an apostle. My husband's an introverted evangelist, if you can imagine that. The way that looks is very different than an extroverted evangelist. Very different. But so in terms of mission, it complements each other. But we're always looking for ways to deploy our kids and deploy the people that are coming on mission with us, for sure. Great question.
Do you as an introvert find that your people of peace have been primarily introverts themselves?
No. One of the things that we say is you can't choose your people of peace. You can't choose your people of peace. So no, I would say not. Great question. Any other things you're thinking about? All right, well, let me tell you about something that is an opportunity for everybody, and then I'm happy to stay on if there's some of you that want to keep talking about this too. So I'm observing this is a thing. We advertised a webinar, and we had 85 people from all over the world say, ooh, I need that. And lots of them say, hey, can I get the recording? Because I can't be there, but pretty please, with a cherry on top, will you send me the recording? Right? So something about this conversation seems important. And so there's only so much that we can cover in an hour webinar. And in this space, it's mostly me talking at you, not us really being able to dive into the relationship. The only way that I know how to teach someone how to engage further is to invite you closer into my life and disciple you into it. And so I want to offer that opportunity. I want to experiment with something, and that is, For those who are interested in further engaging a life on mission, if mission is the place where you feel stuck, or you want to get better at training other people how to do mission, I want to do kind of like a mission boot camp, so to speak. What I don't want to do, I have lots of spaces where I train people who are collecting more information. I don't want to do that. I want to do something where if you want to do this, I will give you practical tools, practical steps. We'll have homework. We'll say, great, over the next couple of weeks, try this. And so if that sounds like what you're looking for, where you're getting practical next steps, how to grow a lifestyle on mission and do it with other people, I want to do an online learning lab. And it'll have a couple different components. There'll be some live Zoom. It'll be smaller than this because not everyone is going to say yes to that invitation, right? But we'll have some teaching time and then space where you contextualize to your missional context. But then I'm going to start a closed Facebook group just for people who are part of that learning lab, where you can interact with one another. We'll do Facebook Lives. You can ask questions. You'll post your kairos and things that are standing out to you. So if you want to do kind of a missional sort of learning lab that feels more like a boot camp, where you're growing a missional lifestyle with other people, I want to invite you into that. So I'm going to send an email with some more information about that and get you some more information. And then you can let me know if that sounds interesting to you and you want to try it out. Good? Okay. Well, it's been fun to be with all of you. Thanks for showing your faces and being a part of today. It's been really fun to be with all of you guys. And I'm sure that we'll have some follow-up coming in the coming days and weeks. All right. All right. Good to see you guys.